What if you were hiding a mighty secret in the most unassuming place? Picture this. A sun-drenched ranch, nestled in the heart of nowhere, with sprawling hills and stretching fences that seem to go on forever. It's a haven of tranquility, a pocket of peace in an increasingly chaotic world. Yet beneath this serene facade, the air is thick with tension, and the ground is warily alert, like a mother duck protecting her brood from unseen predators. Now, what happens when the silence is shattered by a cacophony of gunfire and chaos? In a world where trust is a luxury, and everyone knows someone capable of betrayal, imagine waking up to the sound of armed riders trampling upon your quiet existence. This is the unsettling reality for one lone farmer, Joe Hartman, a man whose reputation as a hermit belies a past steeped in military prowess. As the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow on the modest wooden farmhouse, the stillness of the ranch was abruptly interrupted. Joe, an imposing figure in his own right, stood at the edge of the pasture, mending a fence. He was a man accustomed to solitude, wearing his years like a well-loved flannel shirt, battered but comforting. However, that day, an unshakable feeling emerged, a gut instinct that sent tremors of unease through from the tips of his calloused fingers to his weathered heart. There was something sinister approaching. Studies show that our instincts can often allow us to sense danger before our logical minds catch up. Joe's instinct was honed through years of military training, something he had hoped to leave behind when he retired to this unassuming ranch. Yet, the dark shadows of his past lingered, like ghosts clinging to the walls of memory. As he peered through the tall grass, watching the livestock graze unbothered, he caught sight of dust rising along the horizon like smoke from a distant fire. Squinting, he recognized the silhouettes of horses and men, and the pit in his stomach widened. These men weren't here for pleasantries. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, and the atmosphere thickened as the riders drew nearer. Joe's heart raced, not from fear but from anticipation. Years of combat had taught him one vital lesson: knowledge is power, and strategy is survival. He recalled the cold, hard truth of social psychology. People aren't just capable of violence, they often seek power through it. In the safe sanctity of their homes, many forget that menace rests uncomfortably beneath the surface of societal norms, waiting for the right moment to strike. As the band of riders galloped onto his property, the day turned ominous. Their faces twisted in grim determination, revealing a shared hunger for chaos. Joe clenched his fist, feeling a wave of adrenaline surge through him. This was not just a raid, it was a calculated assault. He understood their motivations as intimately as he recognized his own fear, power, and a twisted sense of control. Joe bellowed, his voice echoing over the hills like a thunderclap, powerful and unwavering. The riders momentarily halted, taken aback. The winds rustled, and the silence that followed was electric, a palpable tension, a standoff. In that brief moment, the dynamics shifted, laying bare the psychology of intimidation. Joe stood tall, embodying the very essence of defiance. Herding cattle had never prepared him for staring down an armed gang, but that day, strategies from battle flickered through his mind like flickering flames. Use their confidence against them, he thought, recalling the teachings of leadership and influence. A show of might could either deter them or ignite their aggression. And Joe was no stranger to the thin line between violence and negotiation. But considering negotiation means understanding your opponent. These men were undoubtedly driven by a singular purpose: profit. The threat of human behavior is often driven by simplicity: meet needs, gain status, keep control. Joe had read many behavioral studies that outlined how threats often forced individuals to band together, but he also knew isolation could be their undoing. While they craved the power of the group, their dynamics could be used against them. "Listen," he shouted, channeling an unexpected calm amidst the storm. "You'll find nothing of value here." His voice, steady and unfaltering, sliced through the tension like a knife, revealing the cracks of uncertainty beneath the rough exterior of the intruders. One rider, who appeared to be the leader, tilted his head, weighing Joe's defiance against his own desires. "We know what you have, old man. Don't pretend like your secrets are safe," he snarled, taking a step forward, gun at the ready, eyes glinting with the hunger for conquering. Secrets. That word lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Joe felt a pulse in his veins, an urge to reveal the truth he had carried silently for years. Is it ever right to assume that power, once wielded, remains dormant? Or does it wait, quivering with energy, ready to unleash chaos in the right situation? Joe's mind jumped back and forth, on the precipice of choice. He had buried the remnants of love and loss that drove him into the military, the pain and pride of service wrapped in deceit and horror. Every bullet he fired, every order he followed was a thread in the tapestry of his life, blending seamlessly with the fabric of this quiet ranch. Perhaps this was all a test, waves crashing against the rocks of his resolve. As painful as it was to face his past, the encounters with the ghosts of his memories had commanded respect. The fearless individual remains unyielding even when faced with darkness. His chest rose and fell, filled with breaths of the soldier and the farmer. "You have no idea what you're stepping into," he declared, realizing that perhaps it was time to show them the truth. The seasoned warriors of war know that threats resonate beyond their tangible existence. They loot the soul and threaten dignity and peace. Instincts meld with emotional intelligence. Force them to see you as human, he thought. With every push and pull of adrenaline coursing through him, Joe recalled operational plans he once executed flawlessly, creating layers of strategy that could be woven into the fabric of a tactical response. The art of war, so familiar to him, was rooted in the understanding of both the opponent and the self-mastery of fear and resilience. Right then, a decision formed like an approaching storm. He maneuvered back to the farmhouse, each step like a drumbeat in the silence. The rider's impatience brewed, and impatience is a dangerous behavior in a group. Joe contemplated how fear could easily turn to carelessness, to recklessness. At the edge of the porch, he hesitated. The reality of what lay hidden within the walls of his home was a burden he had shouldered long enough. Days and nights spent constructing his hidden arsenal, the very embodiment of his past laid waiting for this appointment, like a coiled snake ready to strike. Barked the leader, his impatience now matched by anger, though there was a thread of apprehension. The air was fraught with the unspoken power present, yet fragile, flickering like an old television set on the brink of static. In moments of chaos, the mind is remarkably sharp and quick. It sifts through rehearsed actions and prepares for the unexpected, and Joe had been preparing for this moment for years now. "I'll show you my secret," Joe bellowed, a voice that cracked like lightning splitting the air. In that instant, the weight of his history and the burden of his choices swelled above him, momentarily eclipsing the darkness that was encroaching. Joe strode toward the door, feeling every eye upon him. The riders exchanged glances, filled with skepticism and curiosity, the power struggle growing ever more palpable. He swung open the door with a fierce determination, and a gasp escaped from those gathered, silhouetted against the bright rays spilling from the threshold. What lay inside was not just a stash of weapons, but a vault of memories and pride. Each gun and gear represented a story, a life lived amidst the tensions of war, a sanctuary constructed against the ravages of betrayal, duty, and sacrifice. The moment hung delicately, a symphony of hesitation and anticipation, the spark igniting the undeniable conflict. Would they be struck with awe or blinded by greed? Joe stood on the edge of revelation, daring to gamble everything, caught between the shadows of his past and a nebulous future. He was no longer merely a farmer. He was a soldier standing ready against the tide, ready to unleash chaos or find balance. And as the armed riders hovered on the precipice of their next move, the question hung heavy in the air. What secrets would be unearthed, and who would emerge victorious when the dust finally settled? The tension was electric, the kind that ignites the very fibers of one's soul. Only time would reveal the path ahead, and in that now thickening moment the stage was set, and the stakes had never been higher. What if your quiet life, forged in solitude, was suddenly shattered by the brutal reality that danger can sometimes ride in on horseback? Imagine this: a secluded ranch, far removed from the noise and haste of modern cities, bathed in the warm glow of an evening sun. This is not just a plot of land. It's a sanctuary, meticulously cultivated by a man who prefers the company of cattle to the chaos of civilization. But lurking behind the ageless trees and rolling hills, something sinister waits. What happens when the past collides with the present in the way only fate can orchestrate? Meet Bill Tanner, an unassuming farmer whose rugged hands tell stories of toil, heartache, and resilience. Bill embodies the archetype of the lonely farmer, weathered by time and trials. He spent countless days mending fences and tilling soil, finding solace in the rhythm of nature, a symphony of rustling leaves and distant calls of birds. Yet beneath this facade of simplicity lies a man shaped by loss and survival, his soul marked by the indelible scars of war. For Bill, life on the ranch was a deliberate choice, a retreat from a world he had sworn to protect. Decades ago, he had left the battlefield, one filled with the chaos of gunfire and the weight of moral decisions that still haunted him. War had instilled in him a sense of duty, but it came at a price: the loss of camaraderie, family, and a piece of his identity. Like countless veterans, he sought normalcy in the embrace of the earth, convinced that the hard work under the sun would drown out the phantoms of his past. But as social psychology tells us, the scars of war don't heal without acknowledgement. Bill's attempts to bury his memories merely pushed them further underground, ripe for unexpected resurfacing. Just as buried emotions can fester and grow more potent, so too can secrets, especially those involving power and violence. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, igniting the sky in vibrant oranges and purples, a rumble disturbed the peaceful air. It began as a low growl reminiscent of thunder but more unsettling, raw with intent. Bill paused, his instincts honed by years of military service springing to life. He squinted into the distance, where a cloud of dust billowed like a warning sigil. He felt it long before he saw it, caution turning into dread. Even in this secluded realm, danger could approach like a predator stalking its prey. Soon, 7 figures emerged, riding hard and fast, their faces obscured by hats, but their intentions mirroring the aggression of wolves. As they trotted closer, adrenaline surged through Bill's veins, rekindling a flicker of that soldier who had once faced enemy lines with unwavering resolve. These riders were armed not just with rifles, but with the audacity that comes from the reckless belief that they could disrupt his sanctuary. It was the kind of intrusion that had the power to shake foundations, broken dreams, and hidden truths. The rider at the forefront, a burly man wrapped in leather, raised a hand, an absurd gesture of false camaraderie amid the violent intent radiating from the group. "Stay where you are, old man," he called, the tone dripping with arrogance. It was a command masked as a greeting, the type of social dominance that makes us keenly aware of our vulnerabilities, a psychological maneuver designed to instill fear. Bill stood against the weathered wooden railing of his porch, an image of steadfastness amidst the encroaching storm. He'd faced worse, had seen the horrors that men could inflict upon one another during his tour, but this moment ignited a flicker of defiance in him. He held tightly to the truth, the knowledge that underestimating an adversary can lead to their downfall. Bill called back, his voice echoing through the arid air, firm but tinged with the trepidation of someone who recognizes the precarious balance of power. "A few supplies, maybe some livestock. We all have our needs, old man," the leader replied, a smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. But that smirk would quickly fade. Bill understood the psychology behind such threats. Research shows that aggression often stems from a perceived lack of power wherein the aggressor feels compelled to assert dominance to recover a sense of control. These men yearned for control over Bill, over their own lives twisted by desperation and impulse. As social animals, we crave the acceptance and stability found in community. However, isolation can warp normal behavior into chaos and desperation. This was their chaos, and Bill knew too well that desperation could breed recklessness. "Turn around," Bill shouted, steeling himself, his heart pounding not from fear but from the whisper of his past returning with fists raised. Each word was a calculated maneuver, a flick of the psychological chessboard, challenging them to reconsider their impending assault. Yet the burly leader only laughed, collecting the confidence of his fellow riders like a trophy. He taunted, as if he possessed some twisted insight into Bill's life. In that heartbeat of challenge, Bill felt the cold grip of fear interwoven with the heat of anger. The term secret wrapped around him like a vice, suffocating yet exhilarating. The truth held the power to shape destinies, and the secret he guarded so fiercely could spell disaster for not only him, but for these reckless interlopers. As Bill's mind swirled, the specter of his former life loomed larger, a war veteran who had traded the battlefield for the bowels of a ranch. His hands, the lifeblood of labor, had skillfully crafted something more than just cattle and crops. In the depths of his barn, hidden beneath the pretense of farming equipment, lay an arsenal of military-grade weapons, remnants of a life he had not so thoroughly escaped. He had spent years transforming pain into purpose, channeling his experience into a means of survival. The psychological phenomenon of compartmentalization, it allows us to guard painful memories and decisions as though they were locked away in transparent boxes. Bill believed he was simply choosing to live a straightforward life, but he had merely buried a minefield of potential disasters. Now those buried secrets were a flickering candle, exposed to the winds of greed and threat. "Yes, there's a reason people know your name, Tanner," the leader spat, dismissing Bill's firmness with a gesture. "You think we didn't do our homework?" The jaws of tension tightened, forcing Bill's thoughts to race. Here was a crossroads as clear as any he faced in combat, a moment pregnant with potential for destruction or resolution. What would he choose? "Make a mistake with the wrong man, and you'll find yourself in over your head," he warned, feeling a surge of power clash with vulnerability. Authority can easily turn to violence when disrespected. Bill felt a familiar weight swirl in his gut as he recalled truths learned through the unforgiving lessons of history. The clash of ideologies existed not only on a battlefield, but echoed through human behavior itself, often provoking aggression when power and autonomy are questioned. Unwaveringly, Bill stood tall, anchoring himself in the knowledge that vulnerability, paired with expertise, can forge an unbreakable defense. But the riders were not here to barter. They were armed with desperation. They edged closer, their intentions transforming into palpable threats, drowning any remaining calm. In that moment, Bill realized he must embrace the very skills that had instilled fear in enemies once before. He reached for the earthen connections he had built over the years, blending the rugged past, present cue, and seamless connection to the collected bravery that burgeoned within him. "Tell me, gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "what did you think you'd gain from this?" Like the murmur of a slow-moving storm, confusion flickered across their faces. The more Bill projected strength, the more it reverberated through their collective psyche, shifting dynamics. Emerging from the dark recess of his memories, the stories of battles fought became as clear as the horizon line in front of him. Daring to unearth the heavy truths tended carefully in the recesses of his mind, Bill recalled the precision needed in moments of chaos, the necessity of sacrifice and strategic thinking. Every wound he carried was now armor as he faced the intruders, feeling the change ripple through the air. "Maybe you're right. Perhaps I am hiding something valuable," Bill said, shifting the weight of the moment. As colorful hues turned into shades of gray, billowing clouds draped the sky, the calm before the storm. His words hung heavily, suspended in the charged air, about to unfold into something greater as the threat and his reluctance converged. The narrative expanded, an unfolding promise of conflict intertwining a reminder from his past. The deeper the roots of a secret, the harder it is to eradicate. The leader eyed Bill skeptically, gauging whether the farmer before him was bluffing or wielded a truth that could plunge them all into chaos. After all, power dynamics are often defined by the unpredictability of a moment. Bill could sense uncertainty threading through the group, an unsown seed of doubt murmuring within their ranks. "You see," Bill continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "secrets can be like landmine triggers waiting to create chaos." As the tension tightened its grip around them, Bill recognized that he had captivated their focus. What had initially seemed like a simple raid was morphing into a battle of wills and minds. Each heart rate quickened, building a crescendo that was as much psychological as it was physical. And just like that, time paused, hanging precariously. The uncharted territory of decisions and secrets, entwined in a delicate dance of manipulation and fear. The stakes were raised, with both sides poised for action, either to protect or to prey. Glimpses of uncertainty crested across the faces of his assailants, even as they gripped their weapons tighter. Every muscle within Bill's frame drew upon the depth of his decades of experience. This confrontation was not simply about a ranch or resources. It was an intricate battle of survival, where secrets wielded the true power. As if sensing the fragile equilibrium, the leader leaned forward, suspicious yet intrigued, jaws tight with the carbon-stained urgency that only desperation could breed. He challenged, the rhythm of the standoff crackling with electric tension, a standoff hinging on the razor's edge. The sun dipped lower, shrouding the world in twilight, a stark contrast to the tempest brewing within. Bill's secret loomed over them like a mountain, an edifice of past decisions rippling with potential fate. He was now a man wielding the knowledge of translation, not merely interpreting threats but redefining them. But would he pursue the shadow of his past, or step back into obscurity? The answer, it seemed, would ride on the unpredictable winds of choice, ready to reveal the next twist in a tale steeped in darkness and survival. And as the horizon shifted toward night, so too did the delicate balance of power spin wildly through the charged atmosphere, ready to break with the shift of a finger. In that moment, every heart held its breath, awaiting the dominoes to fall. What lay just beyond the precipice of truth would unfold the looming chaos, the very essence of a secret ready to reveal its true nature. Bill Tanner stood at a critical juncture, the weight of past and present colliding, as he prepared to unleash a revelation that could forever alter the course of fate. What would you do if your past hidden from the world came galloping back to claim you at the most unexpected moment? Picture this: a serene ranch bathed in the warm glow of twilight, sprawling hills punctuated by grazing cattle and the comforting whisper of the wind. Yet beneath this seemingly idyllic exterior lies a tempest ready to erupt at any moment. A storm that embodies both the fears and the triumphs of its inhabitant, a lonely farmer named Hank Taylor. On the surface, Hank appears to be just another rustic soul lost to the folds of time, a relic of rural America. With hands rugged from toil and a face etched with the wisdom of years spent beneath an unforgiving sun, he spends his days mending fences and harvesting crops. But on this quiet evening, as the fiery sun sank below the horizon, a new reality intruded on his peace. In the distance, a cloud of dust stirred ominously, growing larger like a monstrous wave threatening to crash over a tranquil shore. Hank squinted against the fading light, his heart racing, an instinct honed through years of grace and loneliness stirring within him. It wasn't just the dust that troubled him. It was the uneasy silence that fell over the ranch like a heavy blanket, an archetypal prelude to disaster. As they drew near, Hank recognized the silhouettes of men on horseback, their figures outlined against the fading sky, with malicious intent cloaking them like dark clouds. Armed riders was a phrase that echoed through history, often marred by bloodshed and violence. For Hank, who had long buried his military past in the hopes of starting anew, this was more than a mere raid. It was a triggering of memories best left untouched. Now, let's pause for a moment. What drives men to trespass on another's sanctuary? What desperation fuels such reckless behavior? Social psychology often reveals an intriguing truth. Most people will commit acts of aggression when they feel backed into a corner, scrambling for power that they perceive is slipping away. These riders were not just after property. They operated under a cloak of collective desperation, a volatile cocktail that made them incredibly dangerous. As the gang neared the ranch gates, Hank felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger mixed with fear, but above all, a familiar resolve. Memories of combat training, survival strategies, and camaraderie surged forward, pushing aside the shadows of the quiet life he had constructed. He knew he had to face them, and he had to do it now. He shouted, his voice resonating with authority, cutting through the tension like a knife. The leader, a hulking figure with a weathered face, laughed, an echo of ignorance mixed with bravado. "You think we're just here to chat, old man?" But Hank stood firm. "You think you can just ride in here, take what's mine, and walk away?" In that moment, the psychology of power warped around them. Hank was not merely reclaiming his territory. He was asserting that he was no longer just the lonely farmer they presumed him to be. He felt the centuries-old warrior rise within him, recalling the ethos of soldiers long past who had held their ground against insurmountable odds. His assertion didn't just hang in the air, it reverberated. The group faltered momentarily, caught off guard by the unexpected defiance. For a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickered within their ranks, an opening Hank needed, a crack in the facade. "Let me tell you something about this place," he continued, heartbeats echoing like a drum in his ears. "It's been built on sweat, blood, and decisions. You think power lies in weapons and violence." Though he spoke to intimidate, his words also bore an unintentional truth. Social psychology tells us that confidence is contagious. Fear can be as seductive as bravado. Hank's calmness struck at the heart of their aggression, forcing them to question not just him, but themselves. Still, the leader scoffed, steel in his eyes. "You've got guts, old man." Yet Hank's words had bitten into the air, and for the first time the riders looked less sure of their righteous indignation. They were not just thieves. They were men driven by raw aspirations twisted into desperation, wielding chaos out of fear. The voice, soft yet firm, broke through the charged atmosphere. It was his wife, Sarah, emerging from the farmhouse, her presence a beacon of light amidst the darkness threatening to engulf them. She commanded, eyes narrowing on the intruders. As if sensing the burgeoning tension, the leader's bravado began to crack. He sneered, but there was hesitance now in his stance. He had not anticipated a partner, a companion standing steadfast, holding ground beside Hank. Hank felt his defenses strengthen. It wasn't just him against the invading forces. It was a united front forged by love and shared history. He had not fought wars alone, and he wasn't going to succumb now without a fight. "Leave us alone, and you might get out of here with your lives. This isn't the battle you're looking for," Hank warned, utilizing a life lesson learned long ago. Sometimes, the act of feigning weakness can be the strongest strategy of all. What Hank did next was perhaps unexpected. He retreated, drawing the riders' attention, inviting them further into the feigned complacency of his quiet life, while he also considered the hidden arsenal stashed away within his barn, a remnant of his military past. Each dusty container held more than just weapons. They were the embodiment of choices, scars, everything he had once been. He nodded, the whisper of nostalgia mingling with his present circumstances. His attention honed further. He sensed the ripples of hopes dashed in the riders' futile hope for glory, and he could feel their intention shift slightly, wonderingly, as their bravado faltered. In the depths of his training, they had learned that the mind is the battlefield's greatest weapon. Each moment is filled with choices, and each choice defines who they ultimately become. And here Hank was, standing at an inflection point, to escalate or to negotiate. A measured pause swept over the scene, and Hank drew upon the wisdom of both time and experience. Would they attempt to breach the walls he had painstakingly built, or was there a way to leverage this pulsating tension? He called out, voice steady like the earth beneath his feet, eyes unflinching. "I've got supplies, food, and water." A manipulation of agency, designed to shift power dynamics in a way that could avert immediate conflict. The leader paused, a mix of frustration and intrigue twisting his features. They had come expecting resistance, an old man frail and beaten down by time. Instead, they were met with a man armed with knowledge and cunning, deeply entwined with the land and its shadows. He spat, masking the apprehensive uncertainty that now underpinned his tone with bravado. "Because you'll find a stronger weapon behind these walls than anything you have in those holsters," Hank replied, indicating the barn that housed his secrets. In that moment, the stakes were as high as ever. If they pressed the matter further, they risked opening Pandora's box. Yet there was an undeniable beauty in vulnerability. Soldiers know well that beneath layers of steel lies the soft heart of humanity. Imagine the conflict churning within Hank, dictated by the weight of both his past and the sanctity of his present. Would sharing his secrets spell disaster or salvation? He glanced at Sarah, who mirrored his resolve, both anchoring and guiding him. Their eyes spoke volumes, a language of love forged through trials, tests, and the sheer unpredictability of life itself. Hank's heart pounded, recalibrating the rhythm of the moment. The encroaching dusk encased them in shadow, solidifying the collective tension that surrounded them. In a sudden, calculated maneuver, Hank feigned compliance. "You want supplies? It's yours. I'll show you my storage, but you must leave my family out of this." The collective murmurs of uncertainty that swept through the riders were palpable, like a weather vortex spiraling into chaos. Hank saw their surprise flicker in their eyes, a glimmer of something unsettling. The group was comprised of many personalities, each grappling with their own motivations alongside the looming threat of violence, and they were beginning to turn against one another internally. While still bluffing, Hank found a sense of power in shifting perspectives. Each hesitation from the men, each glance exchanged, was a testament to the power of human behavior and the psychology underlying fear and aggression. He was sowing seeds of doubt within them, planting the idea that harmony could emerge from chaos rather than violence. The leader clenched his jaw, hands tightening around his rifle, the tension eloquent and boisterous, a dance of wills unfolding under the watchful eye of fate. He knew such a strategy was fraught with peril, yet Hank had come too far to step back now. "Let's go then," the leader begrudgingly conceded, though the uncertainty in his voice belied his bravado. They hesitated, a sense of caution infiltrating their anticipated aggression, searching for signs of weakness or perhaps clarity. Hank stepped backward, inviting uncertain guests into the dark expanses of his world. The barn stood quiet, too quiet, holding secrets as heavy as lead. Every step toward the heart of it risked a turn of fate, where courage wove itself tightly with vulnerability. What lay behind those stable doors could unravel history or forge unexpected alliances. As Hank turned toward the oppressive darkness of the barn, dim light seeping through cracks painted shadows across his weathered face, the stakes escalated. Uncertainty lay thick in the air, but so did an unmistakable resolve. "Step inside," he offered, voice steady, each word dripping with intensity. But as he opened the door wide, revealing the obscure depths, an echo of unease rippled through the riders. A latent fear awakened, coupled with curiosity. Perhaps they had awakened something far greater than themselves. The shadow of the barn loomed larger, neon-lit by dusk, as the moment hung suspended, an intricate balance of secrets, desires, and psychological warfare. What awaited on the other side? Would Hank's military past emerge from the shadows to meet them, or would it remain shackled in the quiet corners of a forgotten life? As the wind howled softly outside, carrying with it a tension thick enough to slice, they all stood on the precipice of revelation, a turning point like no other unfolding before them. What if the person living next door could be hiding a past so powerful it could change everything you thought you knew? Picture this: a lonely farmer, deep in the heart of desolate land, a quiet ranch surrounded by a stiff waist-high fence and gently swaying fields of wheat. To the casual observer, it's just another storybook farm, a pastoral image of peace. But what if behind those rustic walls lies an explosive secret, one that could rival a small army? Meet Jack Hollies, a man who has dedicated his life to the land, familiar with the rhythm of seasons and the weight of solitude. He's a creature of habit, tending to his crops and livestock with a devotion that masks the burden he carries, a burden formed in flames of a life not so long ago. Jack had chosen to leave behind the chaotic din of his former world, throwing himself into the arms of agricultural serenity, thinking it would drown out the screams of gunfire and chaos that once punctuated his existence. But as we know from the intricacies of social psychology, the human experience is not easily defined. Studies show that stress and trauma linger, lurking just beneath the surface like ghosts refusing to fade away. Jack believed he had buried his past, but that buried past was about to rise from the ashes. One quiet evening, Jack stood on the porch of his modest farmhouse, the horizon painted in pastel hues as the sun dived below the mountains. He inhaled deeply, the warm air filling his lungs with the scent of earth and growth, a temporary reprieve from the thoughts that plagued his mind. Yet, tranquility is a fleeting illusion, and it was then that an unsettling feeling gripped him, like the tightening of a noose. From the far side of the valley, a cloud of dust began to rise, swirling into the evening sky, an omen of chaos to come. As shadows lengthened and evening settled in, that dust materialized into silhouettes, riders on horseback galloping purposefully toward his homestead. Tension coiled in Jack's chest, an echo of instincts honed from a life once drenched in conflict. Something deep within him rattled, murmuring warnings he couldn't ignore. Adrenaline coursed through him, each heartbeat resonating in his ears. The riders appeared armed and intent-driven by something complex, something deeper than mere theft. This band of marauders wasn't just here for supplies. They were avatars of a predatory instinct, echoing themes of desperation rife within human nature. As they approached, Jack's thoughts tumbled toward the psychology of aggression. The mere sight of them, a group wielding both weapons and daunting bravado, suddenly palpated his world, triggering primal responses. Would they see him as an obstacle to be conquered, or was there a chance he could stand strong against them? He bellowed, voice ringing out against the stillness, determined to project the authority of a man who refused to back down, despite the surge of fear wallowing inside him. The leader of the group, a burly figure wearing a brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes, raised his hand dismissively. The irony of the statement hung thick in the air, as if the very act of confrontation could be neutralized by casual imagery. Yet Jack's instincts screamed otherwise. The very nature of their approach suggested hostile intent. In that moment of confrontation, Jack's past clawed its way back into his consciousness like a specter demanding to be acknowledged. He could still recall the training, the bonds forged in the chaos of combat. He had fought fearlessly alongside others, strategizing under extreme duress, adapting to unraveling landscapes of threats. Would those moments impart their wisdom to him now? "Get off my land," Jack shot back, summoning a defiance born of desperation. His fingers itched to reach for the old rifle hung above the door, a piece of history almost as trusted as his own memories. He remained rooted, aware that the psychology of confrontation often hinged on the balance of perceived strength. The leader's laugh echoed, dismissive as he gestured towards his companions. "You're suiting up for a fight you can't win, old man." The audience of unwelcome guests lingered at the perimeter of his life, eyes scanning his ranch as if it were a stage, ready for drama to unfold. The psychology of their group dynamics was clear. These were not just thieves, but men tangled in layers of their own motivations. The desperation often leads to reckless abandon, where shared goals morph into collective threats. Jack squared his shoulders, each heartbeat marking the weight of those shared experiences. At that moment he recoiled slightly, recognizing the danger of opening himself up to negotiation with people like these. Yet his mind raced. He could feel their desire for power, the hunger of men seeking to seize what they believed was rightfully theirs. "Packs of supplies, gasoline, whatever you've got," the leader declared, his eyes narrowing into slits. The sun cast harsh lines across his face, exposing the psychopathic charm stifled beneath his bravado. The beauty of the dusk made this malevolent presence all the more heinous. Yet a greater thought glimmered in Jack's mind, a flicker of a strategy waiting to be deployed. Years of military training had not extinguished the warrior that still resided within him. The acts of a farmer and soldier intertwined within, and there was a hidden arsenal not just in his heart, but in the very bones of his barn. Jack took a breath, exhaling deeply, choosing his next words like they were wielded bullets. "You think you can just intimidate a man just because he's alone?" This was not bravado, it was understanding, triggering the psychological warfare that danced just beneath the marrow of all confrontations. Jack projected, growing stronger with each syllable. "These fields aren't just crops." As hesitation began to grow in the eyes of the leader and those behind him, Jack felt a surge of confidence course through him. There was something inherent about challenging the motivations of others. It often rewrites narratives, crafting futures anew. Desperation can result in folly, and Jack was keenly aware that the invaders were walking a tightrope. The leader, eyes narrowing, caught the spark of defiance but couldn't fully comprehend its source. "Are you trying to scare us?" Jack moved slowly, deliberately, as if playing a psychological game of his own. "Being scared isn't the same as being unprepared. You think you can take me?" Surprise flared through the band of armed men. They were noting a systemic disintegration of their perceived control. The dynamics were changing, and suddenly their power was questionable. Jack felt the adrenaline of a soldier surging through him, the instinct to assert dominance simmering. "Maybe we're not just here for supplies," the leader admitted, anger flashing, but Jack could see uncertainty flickering beneath the surface. Something akin to understanding washed over Jack as he processed those words. The past surged forth, memories of missions and hidden operations, tactics that had been buried beneath the surface of his new life. And wrapped in that reality lay the kernel of his conflict. Should he reveal what lay beneath the barn or keep it locked in the shadows? It was a psychological tug-of-war, a battle of motives and consequences. Jack knew how men can be driven by both greed and fear. Greed often clouds judgment, twisting motivations until they drain the soul. Had he hidden his past only to resurrect it in this moment? "Look, let's be honest," Jack said, softening his tone, as if gripping the threads of compassion. The leader narrowed his eyes. "We've heard the stories, rumors of hidden caches, of military rations and weapons." Every heartbeat seemed to pierce the air as choice coalesced. In that moment, Jack was wrestling with the very concept of identity and intention. He had tucked his military history in the furrows of his brow, sewn into the fiber of his existence, but revealing it could mean disaster. Jack leaned in, connecting with the leader in a way that made vulnerability feel like power. "Do you understand the cost of what you're pursuing?" The subtle psychologies were at play here. The empathy that sprung from vulnerability could either draw them in closer or push them into reckless violence. Jack was stacking the layers of complexity as tension loomed over the gathering, darkening sky. The leader hesitated, eyes flickering. There was something raw in Jack's plea, something haunting that echoed in the void of fear and aggression. It was a potent reminder: people often retaliate out of fear, while those who confront their traumas emerge stronger and more formidable. Yet still, uncertainty crackled in the air. "We don't have time for stories, old man," the leader replied, but the rise and fall of his chest betrayed the uncertainty brewing within. Jack probed, the psychological dance morphing into something more intricate. "You think you can take everything from me and walk away unscathed?" And it was true. A flash of panic coursed through the group, a ripple that swayed their collective confidence. When confronting someone who refuses to bow down in fear, every reaction will reveal deeper layers of intent and vulnerability. The group of marauders now stood at a precipice, teetering on the edge of recklessness or retreat. Jack scanned the faces before him, feeling the rising tension transform into something else, a gathering storm, a potential of danger or salvation. The gamble was enormous, yet doubt lingered in the shadows of their ambitions. "I'll show you," Jack said, his voice quieting, the tension barely breaking. The air became electric as the words settled, igniting a mix of shock and intrigue within the riders. Each one processed their initial perspectives, wrestling with their desires for power and their fear of the unknown. "Yeah," the leader challenged, his bravado thinning stretched taut across psychological fragility. Yet his eyes sparkled with reckless curiosity, anticipation soaking the dim evening light. Jack felt his resolve harden as memories surged forth, energies swirling in a dance. He had spent years living in the shadows of his service, meticulously crafting a persona of an unremarkable farmer. Yet in that moment, he chose authenticity, choosing to unveil pieces of himself entwined with both pride and regret, an amalgamation of a life lived at both ends of the spectrum. "If you want supplies, I have what you'd never expect," Jack added, stepping forward into the threatening dark, a daring soul challenging the tempest to match him. Each heartbeat accompanied his thoughts. There was value in choice, in control, and there was power in vulnerability. Would this serve as an entrance to confrontation, or could it transform beneath the burden of connection? What awaited on the other side of surrender as they brushed against the budding chaos? With the horizon bathed in encroaching darkness, Jack prepared for the next turn in a confrontation far more intricate than mere theft or violence. As Jack moved toward the barn, the blur of the past collided with the shadows of the present, ready to unfold and redefine destinies. There, within the dark expanse, would lie secrets that, once revealed, could either salvage the remnants of his life or ignite an inferno of chaos surging forth, unveiling the true nature of both sinner and savior. And as Jack opened the barn door, the moment hung suspended, each breath a weighted testament of the histories about to converge. An uncharted terrain of suspense and revelation awaited just behind those rustic wooden doors. What secrets would escape, and how would they reshape the very fabric of an encounter drenched in both desperation and destiny? The stakes had never been higher, and as the night deepened, the quiet ranch braced itself for whatever storm lay ahead. What if a simple farmer, seemingly lost to the rhythms of rural life, was concealing a truth so explosive it could turn the tide of fate in a single heartbeat? Imagine a tranquil ranch nestled in the picturesque countryside, where cornfields sway gently in the wind, and the only sound is the distant call of a hawk. It seems like a postcard from another era, a testament to peace and hard work. But deep beneath this serene surface lies a pulse of danger waiting to be unleashed, a hidden military secret that could unravel everything. Meet Frank Marshall, a man in his late 40s, rugged and weathered not just by the sun, but by the burdens he carries. His hands bear the marks of labor, calloused yet gentle, crafted by years of planting seeds and nurturing life. Frank had earned his peace after serving in the military, a chapter of his life he desperately tried to bury beneath layers of soil and silence. He thought the tranquility of farming would enable him to escape the nightmares that haunted him, the sounds of gunfire, the faces of comrades lost. But as we know all too well, the past has a way of resurfacing sometimes with the fury of a wildfire. On this fateful day, Frank was busy mending a fence that bordered his land, a simple task in a life defined by simplicity. Yet as he knelt in the sunlight, hammer in hand, an unsettling feeling began to creep into his gut. It wasn't just the weathered wood or the creaking hinges of the gate that struck him with unease. It was an instinct that clung to the back of his mind, whispering that something was off. Little did he know, those whispers were the heralds of chaos. Soon, shadows stretched across the ground and the familiar sound of hooves thundering through the dirt reached his ears. Frank stopped, heart racing, as he looked up to see a group of armed riders charging through the fields, their intentions glinting ominously in the sunlight. In that split second, Frank's body went on high alert, a remnant of the soldier he once was. Those riders weren't just trespassing, they were a declaration, a statement of intent that boldly challenged everything he held dear. Frank bellowed, voice steady, but his heart thundered in his chest. The rider leading the charge, a broad-shouldered brute with a scarred face, seemed to revel in the confrontation, a smirk spreading across his lips. "Relax, Farmer Frank, we're not here to harm you yet. But the stakes are high, and you might just have something that we want," he taunted, a ring of authority lacing his words. No longer just a farmer, Frank stood at the threshold of an impending storm, an insurgent force trained to commandeer and conquer. His heart raced as the dynamics of power shifted, with this gang of marauders pushing him to the edge of fear and retaliation. Each journey through the fields had imbued Frank with an acute knowledge of land and territory, the psychology of survival, and in that moment, that knowledge surged to the forefront of his mind. The armed men before him were perhaps anticipating a frightened farmer, but Frank was ready to remind them that the farmer once wielded strength and strategy. He managed to ask, the tremor in his voice masked by a facade of authority. In the world of negotiation, understanding motives often defines outcomes. Frank's gut told him their intentions were riddled with desperation and instinct to assert control over those they perceived as vulnerable. "We need supplies, we'll take what we want," the leader replied, his tone devoid of empathy as if he had fully embraced the darkness of his intentions. With a nod from the leader, a few of the riders began to dismount, moving toward the barn and the farmhouse, their presence invasive and threatening. Frank's mind raced. The barn harbored more than tools and machinery. It concealed an old military cache relic of the man he used to be. He had hidden those remnants carefully, tucking away memories that clung to his psyche like ivy on a forgotten wall. But could he risk revealing that? Frank had read the studies on aggression and fear. He understood that both could ignite through group dynamics. When people feel they have control over an individual, they invariably lose sight of their own humanity. The man before him, full of bravado, had unleashed forces he couldn't comprehend. "Listen, I've got nothing but what you see. You can take what you need, but this isn't worth getting hurt over," Frank offered, subtly edging toward the barn. The moment was tense like a tautly pulled bowstring, and he could feel the abrasive urgency between farmer and predator. "Spare us the sob story, old man. We're not leaving empty-handed, and you better get used to it," the leader snarled, eyes scanning the property with avarice. Sweat dripped down Frank's brow as he weighed his options, moments slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. But what if he could turn the tables? Jack's mind raced as he recalled the pivotal moments in both his training and his life, a delicate dance between the darkness he had witnessed and the light he tried to foster. Sometimes, vulnerability wielded greater power than aggression. Perhaps they needed to see that he was more than just a simple farmer. "You're right," Frank said, taking a deep breath. "There's something in that barn that could be worth more than what you think." The answer danced on his tongue, inviting chaos but also the possibility of salvation. The men halted, skepticism washing over them but curiosity sparked within their ranks. The leader growled, his bravado wavering just slightly. Frank could see the flickering doubt in their eyes. "In every war there are stories. There are things I've seen that you wouldn't believe, stories worth telling, but they come with a price," Frank said, taking one slow step toward the barn. This was a gamble. The stakes were life and death, power and vulnerability. The psychological dynamics became evident. The leader's bravado began to falter as curiosity crept in like an intruder. Would daring to expose his past steer their lust for domination away from violence? Frank understood that revealing the truth hidden within the walls of that barn could either forge an alliance or inflame their aggression. The leader shouted, his voice teetering at the edge of panic, revealing more about his character in that moment than he'd probably intended. Anxiety within the crew bubbled up like a pot boiling over. "What if it is?" Frank pressed. He felt a grounding strength stepping deeper into his power, the old soldier rising within, reminding him that choice left far more room for influence than violence ever could. "Here's the deal," Frank said, voice lowering, eyes sharp and resolute. "You follow me into that barn and I'll show you something worth your trouble. But if you choose to react with aggression, I assure you, it won't end well for any of us." Some of the riders exchanged glances, their own bravado fading ever so slightly as the leader tightened his grip on the reins of control. He said, the humor fading from his voice. Frank nodded toward the barn, breathing steady and deliberate, an encounter tinged with both vulnerability and authority. There was a psychological haze in the air, a dance of motives that shifted like shadows on a wall. "Whatever it is, we want it. Make it quick," the leader finally replied, his voice dripped with unease. There had been a shift, and Jack sensed the power of this moment evolving. They were at the mercy of their curiosity and fear. Jack began to walk to the barn, the dust swirling around him, each step a reclamation of his identity. The whispers of his military life beckoned him, a robust narrative woven through his existence, still waiting to be told. The psychology of fear, he realized, might just lead them to reconsider their journey, a journey they had aimed to turn into chaos. As he approached the barn, action suspended in the air, Jack wrestled with the implications of the truth locked away within. What did he owe to the past he desperately wanted to escape from? Could the revelation of his true self not only save his life, but perhaps even illuminate the tangled lives of these armed riders? With every push of the barn door, a wave of uncertainty mixed with liberation washed over him. As the creaking wood settled, illuminated by slivers of sunlight filtering in through the cracks, Frank faced the dilemma woven into a neatly packaged secret. a cache of military provisions, equipment, and perhaps the remnants of a soldier's identity, a truth steeped in the shadows of his life. The moment hung pregnant in the air, the weight of past decisions colliding with the present moment. Who would emerge from those shadows? Would it serve as a bridge to understanding, or unleash the fires of vengeance? As the armored truth was about to be unveiled, Jack felt the world shift around him, a reckoning laid bare before the darkness. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the barn floor, Frank had reached a precipice of discovery, both for himself and for the armed riders. Would they see the man he truly was, or would the tides of chaos devour them all in its wake? The battle between a lonely farmer and a cadre of desperate men was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. What if beneath the serene landscape of a quiet ranch lies a secret capable of transforming an ordinary man into a reluctant warrior? Imagine this: a stretch of land bathed in the golden hues of dusk, where the only sound is the gentle rustle of corn stalks swaying in the warm breeze. On this seemingly idyllic ranch lives a lonely farmer named Sam Caldwell, a man forged in solitude, whose quiet existence belies an explosive past. But that tranquility is about to be obliterated, shattering the fragile peace he has fought so hard to maintain. It begins on an ordinary day, the air thick with the scent of freshly tilled earth. Sam stands in his fields, his hands stained with dirt, grasping the untamed memories of a life once lived among chaos and conflict. You see, he had once donned the uniform of a soldier, serving his country with honor, but when the echoes of war became too burdensome, he hung up his boots for a flannel shirt and embraced the rhythmic toil of farming. He thought the past was buried, but the past, as social psychology expertly reminds us, often has a habit of haunting our present when we least expect it. As Sam squinted toward the horizon, something shifted in the air. The serenity was pierced by a distant rumble, a sound that rolled like thunder, the approaching menace bit by bit revealing itself. Riders on horseback, dust kicking up like an omen, surged across the field toward his sanctuary. In that moment, something primal ignited in Sam, a flicker of instinct honed by the very training he had sought to forget. Real-life psychology suggests that our instincts can sometimes predict danger even before we consciously recognize it. Sam felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand at attention. He knew this wasn't an everyday occurrence. This was an invasion, a calculated attempt to snatch away the life he had so painstakingly built. The group was armed, aggressive, and encroaching, their intentions as clear as the crimson sky painted above. Sam shouted, his voice bellowing with more authority than he felt. Confidence can be a psychological armor, a facade that attempts to ward off predators. Yet hidden beneath that bravado was a heart racing wildly, instincts flaring to life as adrenaline coursed through his veins. The leader, a man in grimy leather with a glint of menace in his eyes, laughed. "You think we're just going to turn around?" In those words, Sam sensed desperation, the kind that twisted men's souls and drove them to disregard morality. This wasn't merely about theft. It was about power, about exerting dominance over someone they perceived as weak. Social psychology reveals how desperate individuals often form groups, amplifying each other's fears and aggression. Knowing this, Sam focused tighter on the situation unfolding before him. He called, grappling with a mixture of fear and defiance. Could he muster the courage to confront this threat, or would he cower like prey? The leader's voice dripped with entitlement, a twisted interpretation of survival. It was clear they felt justified in their approach, fueled by a toxic blend of bravado and collective desperation. But Sam remembered the lessons ingrained in him during his service. Knowing your enemy often meant predicting their moves. He could feel a spark of courage building as he weighed his options. If he played his cards just right, could he turn the tide? Sam proposed, a calculated diversion to shift the conversation from aggression to intrigue. He'd spent years in the military, deconstructing not just situations but human behavior, discovering that curiosity can unsettle even the boldest of threats. The leader asked, cocking his head, skepticism flaring briefly in his eyes. Sam had taken a gamble, and now the wheels of opportunity spun dangerously close. Sam leaned closer, lowering his voice to draw them in. A ripple of interest surged through the group, the dynamics shifting as their curiosity began to outweigh their bravado. In that instant, Sam realized he might just have them where he wanted, a group of men hesitant, their minds swirling in a cocktail of greed and fear. Feeling the shift, Sam continued, "You take the supplies you need, but you leave my farm untouched. No violence, no bloodshed." As tension crackled in the air, he saw them weigh their options. This psychological dance was delicate. One misstep could send their fears tumbling back to violence. Yet, Sam sensed the wavering resolve in the leader's expression. "In return, you gain your lives, and you get to leave with the supplies without waking the wrath of something you can't control," Sam replied, letting the gravity of his words sink in like a stone thrown into still water. What he hid, he knew, was not merely physical. The barn housed the remnants of his military past, a catalog of survival forged in conflict. Each item in that cache held memories, losses, and scars that told stories of battles fought and the friends he had lost. And then came the flash of recognition, a sense of urgency. As the riders mulled over his proposition, something shifted in the air. Within the barn lay not only the echoes of Sam's past, but also the remnants of a commitment he had made to protect what remained of his soul. Was he prepared to unleash such secrets? "Fine," the leader relented, eyes narrowing. "Lead us there." His threat hung heavy, teetering on the edge of violence. But Sam stood tall, determination seeping through the veneer of composure he had crafted. "And if you dare to enter my barn with malice, you'll find more than you bargained for. This isn't just a farmer's refuge," he challenged, allowing a flicker of the soldier he had once been to shine through. As they started moving toward the barn, anticipation and dread danced a delicate tango in Sam's heart. Each step felt heavy as he led the intruders to the cache embedded within his childhood dreams. What awaited on the other side? Should he tap into the might he once wielded in battle, or could negotiation save not just his life, but perhaps theirs as well? As they reached the barn doors, fatigue mixed with adrenaline. The sunset spilled warm hues across the weathered wood, a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness that loomed overhead. He gestured for the leader to enter first, his heart pounding even harder against the confines of his chest. The leader stepped inside, the group trailing carefully behind him. The air hung thick with uncertainty, driven by the tension of a fragile alliance, curiosity peeking as shadows stretched across the barn floor, swallowing glimmers of light. The leader asked, stepping back as he took in the sight, the remnants of military equipment, crates stacked precariously, a cacophony of supplies hidden beneath a facade of everyday farming life. "What you see is survival," Sam replied, crossing his arms with a resilience born from both fear and hope. As the men absorbed the reality of his arsenal, the dynamics shifted again, fear morphing into something else, recognition. They began to understand he was no simple farmer, but as the adrenaline coursed through their veins, would they see him as a potential ally, or would their greed turn his life into a battleground? The leader's face creased with skepticism. He challenged, surprise bleeding into the edges of his bravado. Sam felt the weight of their fear permeating the room, a blend of anxiety and avarice smoldering. Suddenly, the psychological stakes had escalated. He needed to act quickly. "Think about what this could be for you, a chance to gain not only supplies but a powerful ally." There was a glimmer of doubt in the leader's eyes, the realization that they may have miscalculated their move. Sam's proposition flickered like a candle in the dark. Here was an opportunity for a reimagined future, an escape from the cycle of violence that had brought them standing before him. "Listen, I've walked the path you're on," Sam continued, voice steady, the conviction growing with each word. He saw their uncertainty meld with his own fear, a twisting tender ground where humanity cracked through the facade of aggression. In those moments of vulnerability, revelations unfolded like a flower blooming under the sunlight. These men were struggling against the very nature they thought they could bend to their will. "Take the supplies, but consider this. You could belong to something greater than mere theft. Let me introduce you to a life where you don't have to survive in shadows," Sam pressed, hoping to ignite flickers of hope in their hearts. Suddenly, The leader looked at Sam, belief trembling at the cusp of doubt. A realization washed over him. Perhaps it was time to reconsider what they were fighting for. Would they dare relinquish their quest of plundering for a chance to build something meaningful? Yet the moment was fleeting. The looming specter of greed pushed the leader back into guardedness. He shot back, face twisting into a mask of skepticism. "Then all of us stand to lose more than we can imagine," Sam replied, standing firm. He faced the daunting reality that he might be the one to save them, to lead them into daylight from the dark. The air grew thick, pulses racing as the realities of choice loomed over them. Would they listen, or would the rhythm of violence reign once again? And as the sun dipped below the horizon, a fragile thread of possibility wove itself through the Barnon intersection marked by human connection, fearful vulnerability, and the desperate search for belonging. Sam could feel the tension ripple, thick as a silken thread, holding the promise of both peril and salvation. The stakes had never been higher, and as the night unfurled its dark shroud around them, the real question remained. What would unfold when shadows met the dim light of redemption? In that charged silence, the answer awaited just beyond the threshold, teetering precariously at the edge of choice. What if the quiet farmer next door is more than he seems? What if he is harboring a secret that could alter the very fabric of fate? Imagine a sprawling ranch, a place where the sun kisses the fields at twilight and the air is tinged with the sweet scent of earth. Here lives a solitary man named Tom Granger, whose peaceful exterior hides a turbulent past, a past that is preparing to come crashing back into his life. Tom embodies the archetype of the lonely farmer, weathered hands and etched lines of worry on his brow, nurturing crops that offer a refuge from the shadows of his military days. After years on the front lines, he yearned for normalcy and found it amidst the corn rows and sunflowers. He had convinced himself that hard work could exorcise the demons of his past. Little did he know, the past has a way of creeping back, often with the intent to reclaim its old haunt. On an ordinary evening, Tom stood on his porch, a gentle breeze rustling the corn stalks, his thoughts lost in the day's tasks. But then the tranquility shattered, an unfamiliar sound rolling toward him like an approaching storm. The cadence of galloping hooves, punctuated by raucous laughter, soon filled the air. His heart raced, a primal instinct awakening within. Social psychology teaches us that the human brain rapidly processes threats. In that moment, Tom's body responded before his mind could catch up. His military training kicked in, instincts honed through years of combat flooding back to him. He turned sharply, the hairs on his neck standing on end. There they were, armed riders, dust swirling around them like a dark halo. They approached, their faces marked by brutality and intent. Their leader, a burly man with a reckless gleam in his eye, stroked the handle of his weapon, a twisted smile stretching across his face. He called out, sarcasm dripping from his words. Tom's stomach tightened as dread seeped in. Memories flooded back, vivid flashes of comrades falling and the cacophony of gunfire echoing in his ears. But the past behind him would not dictate the present. He straightened his posture, grounding himself as he summoned a voice that embodied authority. "Just a bit of hospitality from a lonely farmer," the leader snarled, dismounting with casual arrogance. "We're looking for supplies, food, water, whatever you've got." Fear settled in the air, thick and suffocating. Tom felt an urge to retreat, to escape back into the safety of his home, but he knew better. He understood that aggression breeds aggression. Flinching would only embolden them. Research in social psychology confirms that people are often more aggressive when they feel a sense of shared danger. This group didn't see him as a man standing alone. They perceived an opportunity, a target rich with vulnerability. As they approached, Tom knew the statistics. He had trained to confront enemies far more dangerous than mere thieves. "You don't want to do this," Tom replied, his voice steady as he spoke to the men moving closer, their intentions peeking through the bravado. He felt the weight of his words lingering in the air, drawing their attention like a moth to a flame. The leader asked, a sneer curling his lips, but there was a flicker in his eyes. Was it doubt? Tom took a breath, recalling the tenets of negotiation learned on the battlefield. "I'm saying you could have something here that's worth more than a few supplies," he offered, watching their faces closely. Curiosity ignited like kindling in a fire, and for a fleeting moment the tension wavered. "That's not your call to make, farmer," another one of the riders spat, stepping forward. His hand nervously danced near his holstered weapon. "Is it?" Tom leaned into the moment, channeling the spirit of the soldier within. There it was, the flicker of something deeper. The dynamic of power began to shift as he spoke, stirring their curiosity. That statement wasn't just a plea, it was a challenge. Tom felt adrenaline swelling. This could become the turning point. "I've been places, seen things you wouldn't understand," he said, each word carefully crafted like a weapon. "I've got military supplies here, things you can't just find anywhere." As the leader's brow furrowed, curiosity mingled with skepticism. "Prove it," he dared, his bravado cracking. "Follow me and you'll see," Tom replied, motioning toward the barn, the very place where years of disillusioned hope lay scattered beneath the stalls. In his heart he felt an internal battle rattle, revealing his past weighed heavily, but he sensed the urgency to protect everything he had come to cherish. Could this be a way to forge an unlikely alliance? The riders exchanged uncertain glances, and for a heartbeat, the ground beneath them felt unsteady. Tom led the way, feeling a cocktail of fear and determination surge within him. A gamble was in the making, a high-stakes game where the prize could either save lives or cost them dearly. As they entered the barn, the scent of hay and earth rushed to meet them, wrapping around them like a familiar embrace from another time. The space was cluttered, but it housed much more than mere implements of farm life. Among the rakes and mowers lay crates filled with military gear, weapons concealed beneath layers of dusty illusions. The leader asked, the tension in his voice blending uncertainty with greed. His curiosity, once sharpened by hostility, now softened itself to awe. He stepped toward a crate, opening it to reveal its contents, an array of weapons, rations, and tactical gear. Dull light illuminated the glint of metal as the reality of his secret unfurled before them. This is military grade," the leader stuttered, his gaze fixed on the incomprehensible treasure before him. For a moment the man didn't act like a marauder. Instead, he appeared mesmerized, as if the veil of desperation had lifted just slightly. Tom seized the moment. "Now you see, gentlemen, this is a chance for all of us. You can take what you need, but there's a price: leave my home and life intact." The leader's face contorted as internal tumult played out in front of him. Self-preservation wrestled with curiosity and the prospect of a better path. Suddenly, Tom felt a palpable shift, rooted deeply in relationships forged in darkness and human resilience. The leader pushed, the bravado he clung to shrinking with the weight of Tom's proposal. "Because standing together is the only way to survive," Tom countered, channeling the very truths he had learned on the battlefield. "You know the cycle of violence. It doesn't lead anywhere good." Fear was still present, but woven through the threads of their collective uncertainty lay a glimmer of hope. These riders sought power not just from fear, but through the camaraderie of their shared experience. Tom sensed their mindset shift. Could they find the courage to step away from destruction? Underneath the barn's warmth, an unexpected reality unfolded, a chance to breach their imposed barriers and redefine their destinies. But then, like a sudden gust of wind, doubt pulled through the air. One of the riders, a wiry man with sharp features, stepped forward and whispered something to the leader, eyes darting like caged animals. He questioned, an ember of truth flaring among the group. "Then we're all in the same boat," Tom fired back, his voice steady. For a moment silence reigned. The air was heavy, fraught with the weight of their choices. In the agriculture of life, choices grow like seeds scattered in rich earth, destined not just to take root, they have the potential to flourish or wither. Tom held his breath, hoping the spark of realization in their eyes would nurture an alliance. What they desperately needed was connection. "I didn't survive just to watch others suffer." The leader hesitated, fingers flickering against the side of his weapon, torn between instinct and newfound opportunity. It was a stunning dance of psychology, the allure of power tested against vulnerability, and history's lessons unfurling amidst the uncertainty of a new dawn. Just then, a deafening crash shattered the moment. The barn doors flew open, and a shadow loomed. More riders, armed and furious, had burst in, eyes filled with rage. The group standing in the center of the barn quickly shifted, panic erupting as the situation spiraled back to chaos. A new voice shouted, penetrating the charged atmosphere. The leader spun around, fear tugging at his bravado as the shift in dynamics threatened to unravel. Tom's heart raced, recognizing that this was no longer just a matter of negotiation. The stakes had turned excruciatingly high. The remnants of his military past surged forward as adrenaline electrified his senses. This was exactly how chaos had once unfolded amidst the tumult of combat. Tom shouted, positioning himself between the armed intruders and the riders, embodying the spirit of a soldier who had fought for his cause. But the newcomers, fueled by their own aggression and desperation, were undeterred. And in that charged atmosphere, the sense of shared humanity teetered precariously on the cusp of violence, a looming reminder of how quickly trust can dissolve into chaos. Would Tom's secret be enough to protect him, or would it all come crashing down, unraveling the threads of possibility he had struggled to weave? In that moment, destiny hung heavy in the air, and the quiet ranch trembled on the brink of a cataclysmic clash, a storm ready to consume everything in its path. And as the shadows darkened, two forces prepared to collide, each step echoing with the promise of revelation, a story teetering on life and loss, ready to unfurl its unexpected chapters. The darkness was gathering, but so too was the light of human connection, forcing each figure to confront more than just the conflict before them. The real fight was fought within, stitched together by the threads of their hidden truths, as destiny awaited its next move.